Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Sunni Defense. And in this episode, we will be talking about Ghadir Khum. This is a very important event, a sacred event for Shia Muslims. It is venerated to no end by the Shia community. They even have an entire celebration dedicated just for this one event, and it is called Eid-e-Ghadir. You know, like in Eid al-Adha, Eid al-Fitr, they have something called Eid-e-Ghadir, where they celebrate this on a yearly basis. So we'll talk about why it is so important for Shia Muslims in a bit. But first of all, let's just give a very, very brief definition of what this kind of is about. Ghadir Khum is a pond in the desert. So this pond of Khum, an event took place there. So the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he delivered his farewell sermon, his farewell speech at the final Hajj, and the audience was pretty much every man and woman in the entire nation, everybody. And this was like a momentous speech where he spoke about everything from racism to women's rights to everything you could kind of think of, which is very, very important for Muslims. One thing he didn't talk about, though, was who his successor was. And we're going to get to that in a bit. So, after the pilgrimage was over, the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, they all traveled north back to Medina, back to their homes. And on their way north, they rested. You know, they took a rest, a short break during the trip. And the break happened to be at a location near Jaffa that's called Ghadir Khum. Why is this event so important for Shia, you ask? Well, because the Prophet ﷺ spoke of his family. He described his family as a thaqal. A thaqal is a thing of much weight. It's a thing of burden. It's a responsibility on somebody's shoulders. And so just as the Prophet ﷺ used to take care of his family, to provide for him during his life, now it is, after his passing, it is a responsibility of the Muslim nation to take care of the Prophet's family, to give them their due rights, to treat them well, and to respect them just as they respected the Prophet ﷺ in his time. It was also at this same event that the Prophet said the popular words, "Man Kuntu Maula, Aliyun Maula." Now the Shia consider these words an appointment for Ali ibn Abi Talib, an appointment of him as the next leader and successor of the Prophet. Ahlul Sunnah, who are the great majority of Muslims, as well as other minor sects such as all of the other minor sects pretty much, Mu'tazila, Murji'ah, Abadiyya, Khawarij, anything you can think of, they all rejected this claim. Even though many of these groups accepted these words as being the words of the Prophet, yet they rejected that these words meant an appointment for Ali ibn Abi Talib. In this video, we wish to argue against the Shia understanding of this event. We want to show that these words were at best, flimsy evidence for somebody's appointment. That is if we were really generous. Our stance and position is that these words were not words of appointment. And that is what we will be making clear in this video, inshallah. So, we'll get right to it. The first evidence is, of course, the location itself, Ghadir Khum. This was a very insignificant, resting area for travelers. So if the Prophet ﷺ wanted to make such an important announcement, why would he pick a location that has absolutely no value or significance in anybody's eyes? Even al-Majlisi himself, in Bihar al-Anwar, he is a grand Shi'i scholar and very knowledgeable in Hadith. He says that Ghadir Khum was not a very important point. It was rather a pretty, a below average location. He said that there wasn't much greenery, nor was there even much water. So to choose this location to announce somebody's leadership is a very random thing and something incomprehensible. Secondly, if the Prophet wished to appoint Ali, not only is this location inadequate, but the timing itself was inadequate. In other words, the best timing would have been actually at Arafat during the final pilgrimage, or when the Prophet was giving his final sermon, with the attendance of the majority of people from this nation. Instead, choosing to deliver this at Ghadir means that the vast majority of people would have left, and that he was only accompanied by the smaller minority of people at a very random location. Another important location would have been, for example, on top of his pulpit in Medina, on the minbar, and his own mosque in Medina on the minbar in front of everybody. All the dwellers of Medina are present, and they're attentive. And he would say, the leader after me is this guy or that guy. But just to pick a location which is in the middle of nowhere, literally, to announce such an event out of the blue makes absolutely no sense. The Shia would argue back. They would say, this is not true. Most people were present with the Prophet during Ghadir. To this, Ahlus Sunnah would argue and say, this is false. If you look at the map, just a simple look at the map would actually prove to you that this is falsehood, and that it makes absolutely no sense for the majority of people to be present. Rather, the majority of people went back to their lands. The people of Mecca stayed in Mecca. The people of Bahrain went to Bahrain. And by the way, Bahrain is not the same country today. Bahrain was basically another location in Arabia. It was where basically Oman is and the Emirates are today. As for the people of Yemen, they returned south to Yemen, as well as the people of Oman. They went south to Oman. And the people of Ta'if all went south to their lands. So this leaves only the people of Medina that are just returning home with the Prophet, as all of the other people left. Next, a Shi'i will argue. He will say, well, what about the Muslims of Syria? What about the Muslims of Egypt? And what about the Muslims of Iraq? To this, we Ahlus Sunnah respond that at those times, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Syria, Iraq, and Egypt were pagan lands filled with polytheism. They were not Muslim lands, and the majority dwellers of those lands didn't know anything about Islam. We're not saying that there can't be one or two individuals who are of Syrian origins or Egyptian origins, but we're saying that those were not even Muslim lands. So no, there were no returning pilgrims going back to Egypt or Syria or any of those other lands in the north. Also, a simple look at the map would explain this quite clearly. After refuting the Shia with regards to the geographical and temporal context of this narration and disproving their claims, we move to the other element, which is the most valuable element, which is the language and the text of the narration itself. The Prophet ﷺ began his sermon at Ghadir Khum by addressing the people, and he stood up, he looked at the people, and he said, أَلَسْتُ أَوْلَى بِكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُم? Question. The word awla here is basically to mean, he is trying to tell them, do I not have greater claim to you over yourselves? Okay? Or do I not have a greater claim to you than yourselves? Or it could also mean, am I not more beloved to you than your own selves? Meaning, you love me more than you love yourselves. You put me ahead of yourselves. You put my well-being basically before your well-being. Okay? Similar to the Quranic verse that the Prophet is awla from the believers than themselves, and his wives ummahatuhum wa azwajuhu ummahatuhum. Their wives are their mothers. Okay, so what this did was, okay, the people, obviously they heard this and they said, of course this is true. They said, Bala ya Rasulullah. Yes, of course this is true. You are awla, And the Prophet, by doing this, okay, he grabbed their attention. This is like giving a signal. In turn, the people listened attentively, expecting an important announcement to follow. This method of grabbing an audience's attention is an invaluable tool that any speaker or teacher should have, and the Prophet ﷺ is the best of teachers. The example of this is that narration from Shuraih al-Khuzai, where he says that the Prophet on one day came out of his tent and he addressed the people saying, O people, do you not testify that Allah is the only God and that I am his messenger? The people said, of course. And they testified. And then so they were being attentive. And when they became attentive, the Prophet ﷺ taught them about the importance of the Quran and the benefits of reciting it. After the people responded in the affirmative, the Prophet then said, Man kuntu Maula, Aliyun Maula. The word Maula is the topic of discussion here. By agreement of linguists, the word Maula is a word that holds multiple meanings. The general shared meanings between all of these is that of closeness. It establishes a relationship of closeness. And we will go through the main interpretations, okay, that this word has. Starting with the most common and the most popular usage for the word Mawla, which is a master-slave relationship. So it means a sayyid and it means al-abd. A sayyid is the master of a slave. Al-abd is the slave. Okay? For example, Ibn Abbas is the master of Ikrimah. Okay? This is the case as far as the word Mawla is concerned. This is the case 95% of the time. Whenever you come across the word Mawla, 95%, which is extremely high, almost every single time, the word Mawla will mean just this and almost nothing else. Sayyid also means, in Arabia, it also means ones whose opinions are respected, ones whose opinions are heard or respected. For example, Abu Sufyan was from the Asiyad of Quraysh. Quraysh had many sayyids in it. It had many men of high status whose opinions is heard and respected in Qurashi society, in Arabian society. Same thing, in the time of the Sahaba, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, in the time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, during his Khilafah, these people were considered sayyids among the Quraysh. You know, the opinion of Abdullah ibn Zubair, the opinion of Hussein bin Ali, the opinion of Abdullah ibn Umar, they were all, whenever they spoke, the people would shut up and they would listen. Because these are people of great respect and great status in society. They were asiyad. So where does this exactly leave us at this point? How do we apply this to whoever I am his Mawla, Ali is his Mawla? Let's say if it means slavery here, okay, does that mean that the Prophet is saying, whomever I am his slave, Ali is his slave? We know that the Prophet ﷺ, in Arabian society was the slave of no one. Unless we mean slave of God. In that sense, it would kind of work. However, that is very unlikely. But the Prophet ﷺ, he had servants. So he was the master of servants. So the Prophet is saying, whomever I am his master, Ali is also his master. But now you say, how is this possible? If the Prophet is his master, how come Ali is his master? Well, here's the thing. The Prophet ﷺ says, Inna mawla al-qawmi minhum. The Mawla of a people, the Mawla of a tribe is one of them. And it is commonly known in Arabian society that let's say if I am from Bani Tamim and I purchase a servant and my cousin is also from Bani Tamim, this servant which I purchased, he belongs to me, is my Mawla and his Mawla. And in fact, if people refer to him, they will refer to him in general as the Mawla of Banu Tamim. He is the Mawla of Banu Tamim in general. So, in this sense, the most reasonable explanation, because this is the case, as we said, 95% of the time, is that the Prophet is saying, whomever I am his master, Ali is his master. Ali and the Prophet ﷺ are both from Banu Hashim. They're both from the same clan of Quraysh. So whoever the Prophet is his Mawla is technically Ali is also his Mawla. And this is true and this is common and this is very well known among all, Arabs. And this is actually the interpretation of many of the early scholars of Ahlul Sunnah. If you refer to Ibn Zanjaway's book, you'll find some of it. Even Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, when he received this narration, when one of his followers asked him, Man kuntu Maula aliyum Maula, what does this mean, O Imam Ahmad? Imam Ahmad told him, Amrirha kama atat, take it as it is. Meaning, don't give it weird interpretation, take it as it is. And the most common understanding of Mawla is the master of slaves. So whomever the Prophet ﷺ was his master, Ali was also his master. What is the significance of this in this case? Well, the significance is it is similar to saying Ali is from me and I am from Ali. It's very, very similar to this, in the sense that it signifies closeness and it illustrates that both men are related by blood. They're from the same clan, they're from the same tribe, and this bond of kinship, this family relation bond, this demands great respect among Arabs. Okay, so Ali's enemies and whoever was angry at Ali or jealous of Ali, okay, at the time, and there were people, as we will see later, who were angry at him and jealous from him. These people are reminded that Ali is a close family member of the Prophet ﷺ, and thus they must love him because the Prophet loves him. Simple as that, and as clear as that. All right, so can we cite some evidence in support of this explanation? This position, or this interpretation of the word Mawla here, is a very, very solid one that doesn't really need any evidence to back it, because this is, as we said, the meaning of the word Mawla the vast majority of the time. And this is the first thing that comes into the mind of any Arab when he hears the word Mawla. And we'll see something that illustrates this later on. But we will cite some evidence. There's a very, very early narration by Aba Bistam. Aba Bistam is the servant of Osama bin Zayd. Osama bin Zayd is the son of the adopted son of the Prophet. He's the son of Zayd. And Zayd was the Mawla of the Prophet, and Osama was also the Mawla of the Prophet. So the narration says that Ali and Osama, there was a conflict. There was a fight between them. And the narration doesn't say what that fight was about, but some of the scholars, they did actually record what this fight was about. They said that what had happened is that Osama told Ali, "You are not my Mawla, the Prophet is my Mawla only," because that's what he understood from the situation. And so when the Prophet heard this, and he saw that there was a conflict, he praised Osama. And when he praised Osama, Ali felt sad. So when Ali felt sad, the Prophet did not, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did not want to make Ali also upset. So he turned towards Osama and told him, "Oh Osama, man kuntu Maula, Ali wa Maula, whoever I am his Mawla, Ali is also his Mawla." So yes, Ali was actually your Mawla. So don't say he's not. So this narration backs this meaning up and shows that the meaning is related to a master-servant relationship. Another piece of evidence is the narration of Buraidah. And this is an event that happened in Yemen. The Prophet ﷺ, before his pilgrimage, he sent Ali with a group of Muslims. And Ali was the leader of the army. And after the fighting, Ali took a female captive for himself. As part of the khums, he took a female captive for himself, but he prevented the others. So the soldiers were upset, and they were jealous. How can Ali get to take what he wants and prevent us? So when they returned to meet the Prophet later on during the final pilgrimage, they complained to the Prophet, and a lot of these people complained to the Prophet. And the Prophet ﷺ, he got angry and his face turned red, as the narration says. And he says, Ali deserves more than this from the khums. And he looks at Buraidah and he says, "Whoever I am his Mawla, Ali is also his Mawla." Okay, so this is also another evidence, because this is said also in the context of a narration which relates to matter of a master-servant relationship. So it is in the context of an acquisition of a slave, literally. So and it is said to alarm them that they have no right to really criticize Ali, since Ali's servant is also attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, and because they are both Hashemites, and they are tied by blood relation. And due to this blood tie, they had to learn that Ali was very dear to the Prophet, and that they shouldn't upset Ali in any way. And Buraidah himself even says in the same narration that after this, I did not want to say anything to Ali that would upset Ali. We notice the context of the previous narration, and it's a pretty important report. It shows that the reason the Prophet ﷺ said what he said was due to the complaints, of the people who were upset at Ali. The Prophet ﷺ found it proper to address the dwellers of Medina, since they were the neighbors and the people who surround his own family. He found it adequate to settle this matter before their return to their homes at Medina. He could not tolerate any mistreatment of his family. Now this in no way supports the theory of Ali's appointment, rather it weakens it greatly. If someone mistreated your family member, your reply would not be to appoint them as political leader. Your reply would be to show how much they mean to you, and that you request for those who love you to also love them the same way they love you. Now here's an interesting bit. Early Shia actually explained the word Mawla here as master, as in Sayyid, the master of a slave. This is the most common meaning after all, and they were Arabs. However, the issue here is that these guys were extremists. So they actually went and claimed that the entire nation, meaning all of us, were all slaves for the Prophet ﷺ and for Ali. And we know this is not true. I mean, Islam came to free us. And in fact, it came to free whatever remained of slavery, not to create more slaves, definitely not slaves for other human beings. So this was rejected by Ahlul Sunnah. And Ahlul Sunnah said, if this is true, then none of us are allowed to get married. Because a slave cannot get married in Islam without permission of his master. And this is by consensus. They also said that means that nobody in this nation is obliged, or it is not necessary for anybody to pay zakat or charity, because that is not permitted for a slave. And there's also other arguments that Ahlul Sunnah present, but these are really sufficient, and nobody believes that we're all slaves of the Prophet. We would give our lives for the Prophet, but we're not his slaves, and nor does he want us to be. He wants us to be slaves of God, and he himself would free, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of his slaves. As all of you have known who have read the seerah, the Prophet freed every single one of his slaves later on. So, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Other popular meaning for the word Mawla, and this is very closely associated to what we mentioned previously. In fact, it's technically the same thing, So we're going to go through this really quickly. Is that it refers also to the freed slave, and the one who frees them. In Arabic, it's called al-mu'tiq wal-mu'taq. They are both referred to as a mawla in Arabic, and this is extremely common as well, as common as the first one, in fact. And the Prophet ﷺ says in the Hadith, al-wala'u liman a'taq. Al-wala is for the one who frees. So the freed slave in this Arab tradition, the freed slave becomes a loyal follower of the previous master. For example, the big Shi'i leader, Yunus bin Abdul Rahman, he was the Mawla al-Yaqtin, meaning he was the freed slave of the family of Yaqtin. Each Mawla was associated with a tribe or household. This is how it was in Arabia. And this system was very well embedded into Arabian society. So the explanation of this would be the same explanation as the one above it. No need to go through it again. What the Shia really want to explain the word Mawla to, for it to really fit their explanation of things, is to explain Mawla as Qa'id or Imam, meaning as leader. So they want the Prophet to say, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whomever I am his leader, Ali is also his leader. And this would be rejected by the Muslim nation in its entirety as a whole. Nobody would accept it. Not the Jahmiyyah, not the Mu'tazila with their Basri school or Baghdadi school. Neither Ahlul Sunnah nor Ahlul Hadith nor the Fuqaha, nobody would accept that there was the Prophet is our leader, and then there's just this other person who's also our leader. The Prophet ﷺ, according to the Aqidah of the Muslims, he is our sole and only leader. He had no partners in leadership, just as God had no partner in godlyhood. Islam rejects the concept of having these two leaders at once, and the Prophet says, if a man calls for his leadership while the Muslims are united behind another man, kill the former. In fact, when Muawiyah wanted to give bay'ah for his son, one of the first excuses Abdullah ibn Zubayr and others used against him is that if you're willing to step down, we'll accept, the leadership of your son. But as long as you're the leader, we're not going to give bay'ah to your son as the leader. So this causes division in the nation in general, and that's why this concept was rejected in Islam. And the Shia themselves, and here's the thing, the Shia themselves reject the concept of having two leaders at once. Even when Hassan and Hussein were both alive at the same time, leadership and authority was for Al-Hassan. Hussein at that time was simply a follower until Al-Hassan died, and then Hussein became the Imam. So this is how it works in this hierarchy. Now, if the Prophet ﷺ had stepped down and appointed Ali in his place, it would be maybe a different, situation. But nobody who's read the Prophet's biography, nor is it recorded in any history book that such a thing took place. In fact, what we know for certain is that the Prophet ﷺ never stepped down. He kept, issuing policies, he kept organizing the troops, and he kept providing the religious verdicts. He took care of the people's affairs ﷺ, until his death. He never put anybody in his place. In fact, one of the biggest evidences that the narration of Ghadir was not an appointment of Ali's leadership is that the Prophet ﷺ had appointed leaders on top of Ali. Before Ghadir, right before Ghadir in fact, and right after Ghadir. Ghadir happened around the end of the Prophet's life. And so, before Ghadir, you had the Hajj. And who was appointed as the leader of that Hajj? It was Abu Bakr. The Prophet ﷺ appointed Abu Bakr as the prince of the pilgrims. He was the leader of the pilgrims. And this is recorded through an authentic chain by Ibn Ishaq and narrated by Muhammad al-Baqir himself. And then the Prophet ﷺ teaches Ali a couple of verses and he sends them behind Abu Bakr. And when Ali ibn Abi Talib reaches Abu Bakr turns to him and he asks him, "Are you sent as a chief or as a follower?" Ali says, "No, I am sent as a follower." Meaning Abu Bakr is the leader of Ali. Abu Bakr is chief, Ali is follower. And this is the narration of al-Baqir and it is authentic. He says, "Amirun am ma'mur?" Ali says, "Bal ma'mur." And after Ghadir, and this is also right after Ghadir, the Prophet ﷺ became ill. So who took his place in prayer 5 times a day? It was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiyallahu anhu. He was the leader of the prayer. And where was Ali? Was Ali in space? Was he underground? No. He was standing right behind Abu Bakr, being led 5 times a day. So, how is it possible that the Prophet ﷺ would appoint Ali as leader and Ali is being led by other people? That all does not make sense. All of it together, it is irrational behavior if that were the case. Furthermore, the Prophet ﷺ spoke about leadership in many narrations. He spoke about the responsibilities of leaders. He spoke about the qualities of leaders in many sermons and in many traditions. How is it that not once has he referred to a leader as Mawla? He would refer to leaders in these narrations as khulafa, as umara, as a'imma, as ulil amr, as salatin, as hukam, never as Mawla. There's never a narration like this. And I can give examples. For the Prophet ﷺ, he said, سبعة يظلهم الله في ظله يوم لا ظل إلا ظله الإمام العادل. 7 whom God shades in his shadow when there is no shadow except his shadow, a just imam. Imam means leader. Okay? Or he says, من كره من أميره شيئا فليصبر. Whoever sees something he detests from his amir, his chief, then let him exercise patience. And he says, من أتى أبواب السلطان افتتن. Whoever comes to the doors of the sultans, just to suck up to them, meaning, has put himself through ordeal and trial. Okay? And he says, لا تغلوا على 3. Okay? إخلاص العمل لله, to work sincerely for God. ومناصحة أولي الأمر. Okay? To give advice for wali al-amr, okay, the one in authority or the one in charge of your affair. وعلى لزوم جماعة المسلمين, and to remain within the united majority of Muslims. And he says, من أطاع الخليفة فقد أطاعني ومن عصى الخليفة فقد عصاني. Whoever obeys the Khalifa, my successor, has obeyed me. Whoever disobeys my successor has disobeyed me. And he says, إذا حكم الحاكم فاجتهد فأصاب فله أجران. If the ruler rules in a matter and rules justly and properly, then he will get double the reward. So if it's not possible that this is the only narration, it's just not possible that this is the only narration, Ghadir is the only narration out of so many narrations where he refers to leader as Mawla, and then nowhere else does he refer to the word to the word leader as Mawla. It makes no sense linguistically. He should have clearly said, okay, Ali is Amir. In fact, this is what one of the grandchildren of Ali in the authentic narration, one of the children of Al-Hasan, when he was asked about Man Kuntu Maula fa'ali Mawla, he says that the Prophet meant leadership. He wouldn't have said Mawla. He would have said Waliyu Amrikum, the one in charge of your affair. Or he would have said Amir. He would have said Khalifa. He would have said anything that is clear and comprehensible. People would understand it. In addition to this, Shia also have in their books plenty of texts where one imam appoints another imam, as his successor and the leader after him. Now, we don't believe these narrations are true. We believe they're fabricated, but we believe that the fabricators knew some basic Arabic, at least, because they were ancient Arabs or Persian. At least they knew Arabic to some extent. So I have not seen one imam stand and say, oh, whoever I am his mawla, this son of mine is also his mawla. Nobody used a text as vague as this. For example, Muhammad bin Muslim sat with Imam al-Baqir. So when his son Ja'far as-Sadiq, he came in, al-Baqir said, Ya Muhammad, hadha imamuka ba'di. Oh Muhammad, this is your leader after me. فَاقْتَدِي بِهِ وَاقْتَبِسْ مِنْ عِلْمِهِ. Follow his example and take from his knowledge. Okay. Muhammad al-Jawad, when he wanted to appoint his successor, his son, he says, Al-Imamu ba'di ibni Ali. Amruhu amri wa qawluhu qawli wa ta'atuhu ta'ati. He said, the leader after me is my son Ali. Okay? His command is my command, his word is my word, and his obedience is my obedience. Why are these texts so clear? And there's a lot of these. You can go to the Shia books of which book was it? Maybe Ithbat al-Hudat or things. They have a couple of books where just texts about imama. You will find a lot of examples. There's like plenty of examples. Probably chapters in Bihar al-Anwar as well, with similar chapters. Chapters in al-Kafi as well, I think. So why this vagueness from the Prophet ﷺ? Do these people know better Arabic than our Prophet ﷺ? Do they understand how things work better than our Prophet ﷺ? Another meaning for the word Mawla is Wala ul-Islam. There's something called Wala al-Islam. This, for example, is related to verses such as al-Mu'minina wal-Mu'minat, ba'duhum awliya'u ba'd. The believing men and women are awliya of each other. Meaning Islam creates a type of love among its followers, among the adherents of the faith. And this is because the believers, they believe in the same universal truth. So this creates a bond of love and friendship between them as they share the same faith. This is the interpretation of Al-Imam al-Shafi'i. We went through the interpretation of Imam Ahmad previously, who just took it literally. Now this is the interpretation of Imam al-Shafi'i, which has a lot more of a ta'wil to it. And according to him, the word Mawla here in Ghadir entails loyalty, love, closeness. This is definitely a legitimate and acceptable interpretation to the narration of Ghadir. From its main benefits is showing that Ali is a high-ranking believer, not just a Muslim, because the Prophet ﷺ tied his love with his own love. Okay, the muwalat of the Prophet is the muwalat of Ali. Now, there's another type of wala ul-Islam, and this one doesn't apply to this narration, but we're going to go through it so that you know it. In early Islam, if a Muslim helps convert a pagan or polytheist to Islam, this Muslim becomes the mawla of the pagan. This is because when the Prophet was asked, الرجل من أهل الشرك يسلم على يد رجل من المسلمين, a person from the people of shirk embraces Islam at the hands of a person from the Muslims, and the Prophet says, هو أولى الناس بمحياه ومماته, comes his mawla. In this sense, we are all mawali of the Prophet ﷺ, since he helped guide us all to Islam. I mean, none of us would be Muslims if it weren't for the guidance of the Prophet. So the Muslim who converts the pagan also in this sense inherits him. Since the pagan who recently converted, either he has no family or his family is still pagan. So, and they cannot inherit Muslims. So if the Muslim convert dies, his family cannot inherit him. He has to be inherited by the Muslims. So this is why the Prophet ﷺ says in a narration, whoever dies leaving behind a debt or an orphan child, I shall take care of it, as I am his mawla. However, the Prophet says, if he leaves behind inheritance, then his family may take it. So if he leaves an inheritance, his family may take it. But if he leaves a debt, the Prophet will take care of his debt. The Prophet will take care of his family because he is his mawla. He guided him. He brought him into Islam, so he's kind of responsible. Okay? And he says in another narration, وَأَنَا مَوْلَى مَنْ لَا مَوْلَى لَهُ أَرِثُ مَالَهُ وَأَفِقُ عَنْهُ. And the Prophet says, I am the mawla of the one who has no mawla. I inherit his money, meaning if he has no family to inherit him. So obviously he doesn't mean leader, does he? He's not saying I'm the leader of the one who has no leader. That doesn't make sense now, does it? So the mawla here is wala ul-Islam, to help a convert out. So the system was as follows. Basically, the non-Arabs who embraced Islam, they sought to become mawali or allies to the various strong Arab tribes because they gain protection by being associated with a strong Arab tribe. So Arabs are called the patrons, and the convert, in this case, becomes their clients, and he benefits from their protection. This, of course, cannot be applied to the narration of Man Kuntu Maula, Ali Maula, because, okay, the Prophet guided all of us, but Ali really didn't. Okay? So this one doesn't really apply, but it is there for you to know. Now, there is also Mawla. It also means Wali, from the word Walaya. And this is why in some narrations you find the Prophet saying Man kuntu waliya aliyun waliya instead of Man kuntu mawla. So the narrators are expressing it with different words. So Mawla here, or Wali here, in English it means a beloved close friend. This is because basically the word Mawla cannot be translated as a single word to English. The English language has no equivalent, I mean as far as I know, to the word Mawla. Okay? Which is why most translators will simply write friend. You know, that doesn't sound too eloquent, and definitely does not do the word justice, because the word is very eloquent and it means it's just like a combination of love, friendship, and closeness. But since there's no word, usually they'll just simply write friend. Like whoever, I am his friend, Ali is his friend, for example, will be a translation here. And this is similar to the narration, Wali here is similar to the narration of Anas from the Prophet ﷺ, where he says, ثلاثة من حفظهن فهو ولي حقا. Okay, 3 things, if one of you guards them, then he is truly my wali. Wali doesn't mean leader here. You don't become the ruler or the leader of the Prophet, you know. And وَمَنْ ضَيَّعهُنَّ فَهُوَ عَدُوِّ حَقًّا. Whoever wastes these 3, he is truly my enemy. So this is friendship as opposed to enmity. And you will see that this is actually in the context of Hadith Ghadir Khum, because the Prophet says, Man kuntu Maula, Ali Maula, whomever I am his beloved friend, Ali is also his beloved close friend. Allahumma wali man wala wa adi man ada. Oh God, befriend whoever befriends him and be the enemy of his enemy. So this is all in one sentence. This is one connected sentence that the Prophet ﷺ says, and in a single context. And the context is that of friendship, love, and closeness. And this is, by the way, is how the majority of Ahl Sunnah in our days interpret Hadith al-Ghadir. They interpret it as this. And, well, this is not a claim from thin air. There's obviously evidences also that back up this interpretation. Well, I mean, you hear a lot of, for example, Sunnis today, a lot of Muslims in general call their scholars Maulana. Maulana is from the same word. He's saying, oh, my beloved, you know, my close friend, my you know, he's honoring him and showing love and closeness to his sheikh, you know, which is a beautiful thing. Okay, that doesn't mean the sheikh is the political leader, you know, and the khalifa, of course. So from the evidences that back this up is the narration, and for example, in Tarikh ibn Asakir, there's a narration where Umar ibn Khattab, he was the khalifa, and he's sitting in a gathering with a lot of people. Then Ali comes into the gathering, because Ali used to come and talk with Umar Allah, and they used to consult, and he was like the right-hand man, literally, of Umar al-Khattab. So Ali walked in, and when Ali walked in, Umar honored him, you know, greatly, and he greeted him, and he moved to the side and gave him some space so that he would sit, you know. And the people, you know, some of the people who were sitting there, you know, they're like, oh Khalifa, why do you give Ali so much honor than the rest of us, you know? And Umar replied to these people, and what's preventing me from doing so? By Allah, he is my Mawla and the Mawla of every believer. So obviously Mawla here, in the understanding of Umar al-Khattab and the Arabs at the time, did not clearly mean leader. Because if Umar al-Khattab was saying, oh, Ali is my leader, and Umar al-Khattab is the Khalifa, what exactly is he saying here? He's saying, oh, I'm an evil usurper and I took his leadership from him and I stole it and it was his divine right and that. No, of course not. He's saying, why shouldn't I honor him and show him respect that he deserves? Because the Prophet says, whoever loves me should love him. Whoever respects me should respect him. Okay. Another evidence is reported by Imam Ahmed. And it says that when Ali, this time, was the Khalifa, he was passed by a group of Ansar, and the group of Ansar had Abu Ayyub al-Ansari as one of them. So they greeted Ali, the Ansar, and they said, Assalamu alayka ya Mawlana, peace be upon you, our Mawla. Ali looked at them and found it strange. He told them, how can I be your Mawla when you are Arabs? Because most of the Mawali, most of the servants were non-Arabs, and the Ansar are Arabs, from very well-known Arab tribes. So Ali found it strange. Why did you call me Mawla? I am not your Mawla, you're Arabs. And this is because, as I said, 95% of the time, the word Mawla, for any Arab who hears it, is related to master-slave. Even Ali here, he couldn't understand it. Even Ali couldn't understand it. So they explained to him, oh, no, we meant it in the context of when the Prophet says, Man kuntu Maula Ali Mawla. And then Ali understood what they meant. So if Hadith al-Ghadir was such a momentous event, such a great event where Ali was appointed as leader, would Ali really make such a silly mistake and not understand, what the word Mawla is? And the Prophet called you Mawla, and then these guys called you Mawla, but you don't know what they're talking about, So this shows that the meaning they understood it, that also understood it as love. So this is an evidence that backs up, the previous interpretations. And it also explains why there's no narrations from Ali bin Abi Talib talking to Abu Bakr and telling him, oh, Abu Bakr, you stole the Khilafah. Then you hear the Prophet says, Man kuntu Maula Ali Mawla. Ali never uses the narration of Man kuntu Maula Ali Mawla to reclaim his right after Abu Bakr took it. Okay? And I've just recently actually went through about 40 books reading just about Saqifa and the event of Saqifa, where Abu Bakr, became chosen as a leader. And not one of these narrations did Ali go to Abu Bakr and tell him, then you hear the Prophet says, Man kuntu Maula Ali Mawla. Not once. And this, if at any point, he should have clarified it at this point. And now, finally, we have supporter and helper. So the final meaning that we're going to go through for the word Mawla in this video is that of supporter and helper. And this is famous in the Ma'ajim. This would turn the narration into basically whoever takes me as supporter and helper, or whoever considers me his supporter and helper, must also take Ali and consider him as such, supporter and helper. The benefit here of this meaning is to show Ali's sincere character. That Ali's outward actions reflect his honest inner intentions. It is also a prophecy that Ali will never apostate and will always try his best to aid the religion. And the believers, they have to, in turn, befriend him. So this is the final meaning, and this is an acceptable meaning, and it's I've seen a bunch of scholars go for this specific meaning for the word Mawla and Hadith al-Ghadir. And with this we conclude, and throughout this video, you have seen the two Shi'i arguments and how we refuse them and reject them on solid basis and ground. You also saw the interpretations, plenty of interpretations that are valid by Ahl Sunnah, okay? And also some other arguments related to time and location, all of that. And I will leave some reading materials, inshallah, in the description. In the end, we say, Sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Habibina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. And thank you for listening.